So I just got confirmation from the man we're calling up on stage, the one, the only Kgothatso. This man decided to be the driving force, the catalyst behind many changes in South Africa, including Exonumia, where he translates, which is a platform where people translate Bitcoin literature into different African languages, including South Africa. Even in Namibia, we've got our languages also translating the Bitcoin white paper into, as well as coming up with and being the brains behind Machankura, which is how you are able to send Bitcoin and receive Bitcoin without having a smartphone or internet access. You can have a dumb phone, as people call it, or in my country we call it a Tamagotchi. Like, you know, remember the old Tamagotchis? Yeah, that's what we call them. So you can utilize that phone. And without further ado, please put your hands together for the one and only KG.
How's everyone doing? Cool. So yeah, I'm Kgothatso, and Kgothatso Ngako from Machankura. 8333.mobi is the website. Yeah. So if you don't know what 8333 is, that is, what is 8333? The default Bitcoin port for the Bitcoin node, right? So if you run Bitcoin Core on your computer, it will open up a port. And that port is port number 8333. And what we're trying to do is just, port Bitcoin for the mobile devices. And that's why it's 8333.mobi. Right? Machankura is a slang term for money, if you do not know, if you're not a South African. And yeah, it's a weird slang term for money because it's a slang term for a lot of money, right? Not just pocket change. But yeah, and then the logo, designed by me, is of an old telephone, right? Because one thing for me, let me start at the catalyst side, right? I always wanted to run my own thing, right? But I didn't want the title founder or whatever else, because I was like, yeah, what if the company is running for like 10 years, 20 years, and I'm not there anymore? What title does the person who's there that time get, right? And for me, I think the title Catalyst actually highlights what I aim to do a lot more, and what I aim, whoever would be working on not on just Machankura, maybe Exonumia, and maybe even whatever else is started next year or the year after that would be doing. And I think that person would be a catalyst, right? And yeah, accelerating the adoption of Bitcoin without getting burned out, because I don't want to be burnt out 25 years from now when Bitcoin is the global monetary currency and I'm too sick of it to even send it to anyone, right? So I don't want to be burnt out by all of this, and so that's the term for catalyst. And now with the telephone logo, the thing for me was, okay, everyone I talked to about Bitcoin, we were not having a conversation in English, right? I'm from Mamelodi, and Revelela Spitori, Soto, Zulu, Nyana, and whatever else, right? We are not having a conversation in English, so the content, the literature had to be translated into an African language, which is why Exonumia was started, right? And then after 2 hours, the person is now convinced, says, send me some Bitcoin. And I'm like, yo, download a wallet. And they like, oh, I don't have internet. And I'm like, let me hotspot you. And then they like, oh, I don't have enough space on my phone, right? And at the end of the day, I spent 2 hours and I'm not able to even get this person to download a Bitcoin wallet so that I send them some Bitcoin. And this person has a phone, right? So that is the reason why I started Machankura, right? Every person in this room has a phone, and it may not be a flagship Android device, it may not have data, but it has a mobile cellular connection, and that is the whole idea. If you look at the Bitcoin beat, it kind of looks like a telephone booth as well, depending on how you look at it, right? So yeah, now I can get into it. So yeah, I really had a hard time putting these slides together, right? Because I really didn't know what I was going to talk about. But one thing I wanted to do is take some of my favorite slides from other presentations and add them here. So this was one of my favorite presentations where I told ChatGPT to generate a Rorschach test of certain things, right? So anyone recognize, or what do you guys see when you look at that graphic on the left-hand side? A what? A butterfly? A what? Oh, two butterflies? A phoenix. I like a phoenix. Anyone else? Oh, okay. Well, it's actually, I prompted the AI to make it look like a bird, right? So I think phoenix is the closest response. And the whole idea is I had just seen this clip. I don't know if it was Quincy Jones or somebody. Who worked with Michael Jackson on the album Thriller, talking about how while in the studio they would finish mixing the album and then bring out a radio cassette, something like this, and then play the album again, and the mix would sound horrible, right? So then they would go back into the studio and say, okay, for a person listening to the album on a sound system like that, we need to fix this and that and that, right? And at the end of the day, Thriller is one of the highest selling albums, if not the highest selling albums in the world, right? And for me, that clip kind of encapsulated what I think we should be doing as Bitcoiners. We should be saying, okay, how do we bring this thing into the hands of as many people as possible? Oh, and whoever's running the show, my time is not ticking down and I'm going to lose track of time. And I think what we need to do is effectively ensure that, okay, can a person send and receive Bitcoin? Wow, now I'm left with 10 minutes? Okay, cool. The other thing is the first Bitcoin presentation I gave was actually at Adopting Bitcoin in El Salvador. And in that presentation, I highlighted Kendrick Lamar's previous album, which is Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And in this one, highlighting Kendrick Lamar's recent album, which is GNX, and really a great hip-hop project. And I really recommend people to listen to this because this is what peak rap sounds like. And I also feel like hip-hop Bitcoin is currently following the same trajectory that hip-hop followed, but 50 years ago, right? So last year, I think people were celebrating 50 years of hip-hop. And the thing is, I don't think people 50 years ago understood how big hip-hop was going to become, right? Hip-hop was generally the biggest genre of music in the world, right? And so that, for me, I'm like, okay, 50 years from now, Bitcoin will probably be the biggest thing in the world, right? Biggest technology, biggest currency, because it is very adaptable and anyone can build on top of it, right? With hip hop, you just get your DJ, you just get your beatboxer, you just get your rhyme book, and you rhyme. If the people like it, they will embrace it, right? And with Bitcoin, anyone can run a node. I built Machankura in my mother's house, right? And I was running a node on a Raspberry Pi. I think the Raspberry Blitz guys are here today. I don't know if they had their workshop yesterday or today. They're going to have it today, but I highly recommend you attend that workshop because the first node that ever processed the Machankura transaction was actually on a Raspberry Pi, right? And for me, that's why Bitcoin works so well, because anybody could build on top of it and then they would be able to scale it, right? Because it's easy for me to then move from my Raspberry Pi and run it off of AWS in Cape Town for the better security and whatever else. But it's also easy for me to run it on any node in the world, right? Without even a publicly accessible IP address, whether it's running over Tor or whatever else, right? So Bitcoin and hip hop, right? And that is the USSD code. So if you want to use the Machankura service from a South African phone number, you just dial *134 *7714 and you should be able to access the service. All you have to do to create an account is just press 1, right? And so it should be that easy for a person to create a Bitcoin wallet, right? And access a Bitcoin wallet. Then there's another version coming out soon, which would have a more involved account creation process because people want to buy Bitcoin as well, and there's KYC and there's FIC and whatever else. So now for the rest of the presentation, Bitcoin is a pseudonym for Satoshi. If you do not know, Satoshi is the smallest unit of Bitcoin, right? One Satoshi is 0.00001. Bitcoin. Right? But 100 million Satoshis is one Bitcoin. And so, Satoshi Nakamoto is also the pseudonym for the person who created Bitcoin. But we are all Satoshi except for Craig Wright. Right? But, very good. So, but the other thing is, there's a lot of scams in Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin, really, if you trust somebody, you're going to get scammed, right? So luckily, you don't need to trust anybody. You can just verify everything. You can self-custody. You can do all these different things that allow you to even be in business with scammers, right? And I think that is an incredible thing because, scammers, for some reason, have the best work ethic in the world, right? I'm not even lying. When I was working on Exonumia, right, I realized that, really, a lot of people I'm having 2-hour conversations with have already interacted with scammers, and they are just validating information they've already gotten, and all that information is true until the point where they lost money, right? And scammers, I love their work ethic. If everybody in this room could have the work ethic of a scammer, we would be getting somewhere right now. But cool. And Bitcoin is a pseudonym for savings, right? And so Bitcoin, quick story. I was working as a software developer from like 2015 until 2020, right? And in the year 2020, I decided to go all in on Bitcoin. The lockdown and everything else, I was still staying in Cape Town, and there was a day, March sometime in 2020, where the Bitcoin price dipped by like 40 to 50%, right? I ran to the ATM to withdraw money to buy Bitcoin, like literally, because the ATM was closing at 6 and I knocked off at 5:30. So I ran to the ATM, withdrew money, bought some Bitcoin, and then it kind of recovered, right? But then the other thing is, that year, I think I saved almost like 10% of my income, and then the Bitcoin price almost did like a 10x, right, over the next 2 years. And I effectively had like a year's in savings. And that's the only reason I started Machankura, because I had a year's of income in savings from saving 10% of income. And then I could take the risk and then quit my job and then dedicate full-time work to Bitcoin through Exonumia and later on through Machankura, right? So Bitcoin is saving. So you better save some money, at least 10%, and then let the number go up, do the rest for you, right? And Bitcoin is a pseudonym for money, which is why we're here. Bitcoin RC is a wonderful project. And for me, it's really shocking the parallels between Bitcoin RC in Mossel Bay and Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador, right? Michael Peterson was in the country, I think last year, Jan or sometime, right? And it's really shocking that Michael Peterson and Herman are almost clones of each other, just born in different countries at different times, right? Because Bitcoin Beach is a community project teaching kids to surf, to keep them off the streets. Bitcoin RC is a community project teaching kids to surf, to keep them off the streets. And then here comes Bitcoin, right? And they are all using Bitcoin in the community, paying the surfing coaches in the community with Bitcoin. And then I'm like, okay, something is a little weird here. The script writers need to get their shit together, because they cannot be reusing plots in 2 different countries, right? But anyway, and that is why we're here, because Bitcoin is a pseudonym for money. You can use it as a store of value. You could use it as a medium of exchange. You could use it as just a pastime thing, whatever you want to use it for. It's a tool, and it can do anything, right? And Bitcoin is also a pseudonym for champion, right? In this day and age, we all need to be a champion of some sort, because we are living in very dark times. And if you're not a champion, the people you would be championing for are going to face the full brunt of whatever's about to come, right? So I don't know what's about to come, but the biggest champion story in the world, oh, my clicker doesn't work, okay, now it's back. It's David and Goliath, right? So if you don't know about David and Goliath, I really recommend you read a Bible. It's really not that far into the story, right? But it is really one of the best stories about David and Goliath, and about a champion, or the need of a champion. Goliath was effectively the champion for the oppressor in the story, and David was the champion for the oppressed, right? And Goliath was a giant, David was just a boy with a slingshot, right? But at the end of the story, David killed Goliath, right? But we're using one stone, one shot. Done. Story is not over, but yeah, for that part, it's over, right? And yeah, so the interesting thing, during the Kendrick versus Drake beef, right, there's another rapper called David. He's actually called D1, that's his AKA, but his name is David, right? And he loves this David and Goliath story. He keeps bringing it up in every interview, right? And one thing he said, that I was like, oh yeah, he has a point, was that usually the oppressor doesn't let David go fight Goliath, right? The oppressor brings in David into his army to fight alongside Goliath, right? And it takes a lot for a David to say, yo, oh, you want to give me all this money, you want to give me all these concubines, you want to give me all these food, and so that I fight against my own people. It takes a lot to say no to that, right? But every once in a while, David comes along and then defeats whatever giant there is, right? In this day and age, I don't know if we can say the giant is the central banks, right? In South Africa, it used to be okay for me to send money to Oaken in Namibia, and then it would reflect as if it's a local bank transaction. But as of what, September? It has to go through the SWIFT network and take how many days, you know? And then I'm like, wait, but this guy is right across the border, and to me it feels like he's in a different province, right? But it's really going all the way to New York and coming back here, and somebody needs to champion and say, yo, as Africans, we don't need to send our money to your infrastructure when we are able to build the infrastructure ourselves. We even the infrastructure is already there, but the company apparently that manages the SWIFT network decided they were not going to maintain it anymore, so you guys want to have to use SWIFT. But anyway, Bitcoin is a pseudonym for freedom, right? Because you own your own keys. And between these slides, you know, freedom, I think freedom has lost its meaning. So I had to use liberty so that it kind of sounds like it means something again, right? Because for the most part, we're not free. Everything you do, somebody is looking at what you're doing, and you might lose access to either your Twitter account, like the Adopt in Bitcoin Cape Town, or your bank account, which I've lost the bank account before. It's nothing new. And yeah, so now I use the word liberty because freedom really means nothing. I'm supposed to be free, but I don't feel free, right? So yeah, liberty, for me, I think Bitcoin is one of the tools that really allow you to experience liberty, because you can hold your own keys and you can self-custody and you can send a transaction without a middleman, and you could also do the same for everyone around you. And my dream is that everyone I know should own Bitcoin and use Bitcoin, and I always try when someone asks me for money to send them Bitcoin, or at least have them pay me back in Bitcoin. But for some reason, people really just pay me back and then forget about Bitcoin. And the next time they want to ask me for money, then they like, oh yeah, this Bitcoin thing. Oh, now it's actually more expensive than the last time. But I really don't know. But anyway, Bitcoin is a pseudonym for prosperity. And I also think we should love poverty more, right? I really love poverty. I grew up in poverty, and this is not me romanticizing poverty, but poverty is one of the ways to know if the thing you're doing is working or not, right? A pothole is a way to know whether the neighborhood you're living in is doing good or not, right? So if you have too many potholes, it's either you fix them or you move, right? Move to a neighborhood that fixes potholes, right? And so prosperity for me, on the flip side, is poverty, right? Prosperity is how you know what you're doing is working. Poverty is how you know what you're doing is not working. And prosperity only sets in when you are able to say, oh, my kids are going to do okay. My kids' kids are going to do okay. And I think Bitcoin is one of the best ways to ensure that your lineage is actually able to prosper beyond your own existence, right? Thank you for being a dictionary, man. And yeah, then sovereignty. Yeah, thank you. So to end this, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone involved in the project, right? thank you to Satoshi Nakamoto for creating Bitcoin. I think it's really an interesting project that will have an impact on society for centuries to come. And well, thank you to Herman for the work he's doing with Bitcoin Ekasi, because I remember, I think 2021 or so, I took a trip down to Mossel Bay, had a conversation with him and his wife, and I was like, yo, if Bitcoin is going to work, this is what's going to need to happen, blah, 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 blah. But also, the people who are involved in Bitcoin are going to have to be prosperous as well, right? And it came from hip-hop, right? Because with hip-hop, a lot of the people who set the foundation for what we know about hip-hop today really didn't think it would be as big as it is today. So they didn't spend time setting up the infrastructure, setting up themselves for prosperity. Right? And a lot of them are dying at relatively young ages through drug addiction, violence, mental health, whatever else. So it's really frequent where you hear about a rapper dying at the age of 40, 50. Today, another rapper passed away, DJ Unk, who made the song Walk It Like a Talk It. I walk it out like a Nusher, with Andre 3000 on the remix, right? But it's really not even surprising to hear that a rapper passed away, even though rap music is one of the most prosperous genres in the world. And for me, I think that is wrong, right? So with Bitcoin, on the same note, right, 50 years from now, 25 years from now, I do not want to hear about Bitcoiners passing away before the ripe age of 121, right? I want all the Bitcoiners to live for a very long time. So I hope everyone in this room, right, is setting themselves up, living a healthy life, cutting coffee, cutting cigarettes, cutting whatever else you need to cut out, dealing with your own vices, fighting your own demons. But do not just fight your demons, right? Employ them as well, because we're going to need as much assistance as possible in the work that needs to be done, right? So don't just exercise your demons when they could actually do some gainful employment, right? So yeah, and for me, that is the main point I'd like to say. And thank you to Kamal for starting the Adopting Bitcoin conference, and thank you to the co-organizers, Max, for doing a wonderful job, the sound guys in the back, everyone who bought a ticket, everyone who decided to come through, or the MK party for really just... for really deciding to make Bitcoin one of the main focuses as a party, right? And it really came from left field. And I think this is the other shocking thing about Bitcoin. Where we were last year with Bitcoin, where we are now, is really, the improvement is astonishing. Even the year before that, like 5 years ago, nobody knew that El Salvador would make Bitcoin a legal tender. And then that is what pushed me to quit my job, because I was like, oh, there's really a lot of work to be done and not too much time. But anyway, my time is up, and thank you very much for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the day.